The Welsh in the early 18th century are living off the land. But it's the treasures that lie beneath them that will take Wales to the dawn of a new age. One of new discoveries, new inventions, and political awakening. Wales is entering a modern era. It takes just 100 years for Wales to be profoundly changed, with vast supplies of natural resources fueling an industrial revolution. And the Wales that's about to emerge is volatile, is explosive, and exciting. We begin in 1750 as the Industrial Revolution turns Wales into a global economy. The next century brings great wealth. It brings terrible poverty. And it brings connections to the slave trade. We'll see how forgeries help create an extraordinary cultural revival. This brave new world fuels uprisings and social turmoil, and ultimately provokes our very first cries for democracy. It's the early 18th century. 500,000 people live in Wales, still an overwhelmingly rural country. The largest towns are Carmarthen in the south and Wrexham in the north. Each has fewer than 5,000 inhabitants. Almost all the population speak Welsh. But all this is about to change forever because of the very stuff beneath our feet. On Anglesey, Parys Mountain, or Mynydd Parys, is renowned among the locals in the 18th century. It's a world of strangely coloured rocks and earth that smells of sulphur. Parys Mountain is a place of magic and alchemy. But there's about to be another explanation for its character. There is a story that a local miner called Roland Pugh, on the 2nd of March 1768, stumbles upon some ancient treasure. He discovers the remains of a rich vein of copper ore, an ancient vein. It was once worked some 4,000 years ago. And this is the point. There's plenty more of this valuable stuff in the ground. So Mynydd Parys and the surrounding area are being propelled into a new age, an age of industrial revolution, at a speed and on a scale that is unimaginable. This is what remains of the copper mines of Parys Mountain today. A scarred lunar landscape and testament to the start of a whole new era in the story of Wales. Now, you might think that the man whose discovery triggers all of this, the miner Roland Pugh, is amply rewarded. He does get a bottle of whiskey, and he gets a cottage, rent-free for the rest of his days, which for him really is a big deal. But before we get carried away, what about the man who sets up the Parys Mine Company in 1774, the local lawyer Thomas Williams? His reward is rather more impressive. He becomes the Copper King. Williams is one of Wales's greatest entrepreneurs. He makes his fortune by selling Parys copper to the British Navy. They wanted to clad their wooden ships to protect them from damage from timber worms. Even today, we describe anything that's secure and reliable as copper-bottomed. In just 12 years, Williams creates the largest copper mine in Europe,
employing 1,500 men and women.
It's only by coming down to this level that you can really appreciate the graphic reality of this place. The sheer size of it, this barren landscape, and the thing that makes the impact straight away, the strange, vivid colours of lots of these rocks. Just imagine an 18th century farm labourer seeing this place for the first time.
Wales's new industry becomes a mecca for artists and travellers awed by this futuristic vision of toil and labour. Some record in graphic detail what they see. Picking the ore from the rock, hammering the wadding, the roar of the blast.
It's all the more remarkable when you stop and think that this immense crater was made with nothing more than picks and shovels and a bit of gunpowder. I suppose it redefines the concept of hard work. And Parys Mountain points the way ahead in its brutalised environment to the future of industrial Wales.
Roland Pugh rediscovers Wales's valuable minerals. And the transformation this starts is the first of many that will define the next century in the story of Wales.
What's happening here at Parys Mountain is just a taste of what's to come, because Wales has far more to offer the world than just copper ore. This is a land rich in resources. There's lead, there's iron, there's coal, of course. There's a vast fortune to be made, and these resources will be exploited on a global scale thanks to one of the biggest advances in human history.
The Industrial Revolution. It will dominate the next 150 years. Scientific discoveries and new inventions are changing every aspect of daily life. Water power and steam power drive new machines that increase production. This combines with Wales's mineral wealth to make it an industrial powerhouse of global significance.
Here's the challenge. To make 1 ton of unrefined copper in the 18th century, you need 3 tons of coal for the smelting process. It makes far more sense, of course, to bring the copper ore to where the coal is, which is how this place becomes the copper capital of the world. They call it Copperopolis. We call it Swansea. It's ideally located at the heart of a truly global industry.
Swansea is a unique location. It has a deep navigable river, the River Tawe, that leads right up to a rich source of coal. So copper ore is shipped upstream, unloaded and smelted right here on the riverbank. And the coal from the nearby pits feeds the furnaces that smelt the ore. The copper ingots produced here are exported around the world to be used as an ingredient to make bronze and brass. Swansea goes from being a small seaside town to a sprawling centre of industry and a global phenomenon.
The growth of Copperopolis was the first really large-scale industry in Wales. First large-scale heavy industry which transformed the landscape, attracted huge numbers of people from rural Wales to work there. The river would have been very busy with ships, and the whole place would have been absolutely shrouded with sulphurous smoke from the ore smelting. And the overall effect to a newcomer, particularly from a rural area, would have been absolutely shocking.
Many who stay become some of the most skilled copper smelters of the age, and part of the most technologically advanced copper plant in the world.
One of the key things that distinguishes Copperopolis and the story of the growth of the Swansea copper smelting industry was that it was the first truly global industry, the first industry to export this product truly internationally all around the world, both to Asia, the Americas and across Europe to Africa. And it's here at Swansea that that process first began.
As business expands, copper ore from as far away as Cuba, Chile and North America is shipped to Swansea. By 1820, more than half of the world's copper smelting industry is focused on Copperopolis. The lower Swansea Valley is a vision of a new industrial age. Furnaces glow and chimneys belch fumes and smoke. Copperopolis is the beating heart of Wales's industrial revolution. Overgrown and derelict today, you can still see the remains of Havod, once the largest copper works in the world. But for all the greatness of Copperopolis, this valley and its people would pay a heavy price. The copper works pump out sulphurous gases and arsenic by the ton. Workers suffer chronic bronchial diseases. Crops wither in the acid rain and livestock perish. Farmers lodge court cases against the owners of the works for ruining their once fertile soil. By the late 19th century, what Copperopolis leaves behind is the largest derelict industrial landscape in Western Europe. There is another dark side to Wales's first global industry. Copper is an integral part of the slave trade.
One of the few finished products made were manillas. These were brass and copper bangles made to a traditional African shape. Around 3 to 4 dozen manillas such as this would have purchased an adult African slave, which were then transported to the Caribbean and to the southern part of the USA, where they would then work on sugar, cotton and tobacco plantations. And of course the products of those slave economies were then consumed across Western Europe, including of course here at Swansea. People dressed in cotton clothes, they smoked tobacco, they put sugar in their drinks. So really there was a two-way connection with the slave economies and the slave trade of West Africa.
The manillas made in Wales would remain a legal currency in some West African colonies until the start of the Second World War. By 1790, the Welsh Industrial Revolution is unstoppable. Slate from the northwest, coal from Flintshire, and textiles from Bala. They're all sold in Europe.
Despite this transformation, the places we think of as centres of population are lacking some important things. There are no libraries, no universities, no civic centres. So even as industry thrives, bright young people in Wales who want to explore new ideas and pursue an intellectual life have to move elsewhere.
London, the largest city in 18th century Europe, is a cauldron of new ideas, and the Welsh intellectuals flock to it. A remnant of that history still survives today. The Honourable Society of Cymrodorion is set up in 1751 to debate all things Welsh, from history, arts, science to politics.
I give you 2 examples. If you want to think of what Lloyd George's real attitude was towards Wales, I think it's very similar to his real attitude towards his family.
The Cymrodorion Society was set up by Welshmen, and they were mainly men. In fact, I think they were totally men who came to England, to London.
Indeed, I would imagine that it was a coming together of people who had keen literary interests, were keen to know more about the history and traditions of Wales, and people who perhaps played a key part in political life as well.
They were all sorts. I mean, obviously we had the intelligentsia, the people who'd been educated out, in a sense, out of Wales and gone to Oxford and Cambridge and then become lawyers and doctors and things. But we also had people from the artisan class, people who were candle makers or things like that.
In the 18th century, the Honourable Society of Cymrodorion is a club for those who want to assert their identity by delving deep into their history.
Actually, the name Cymrodorion in Welsh means Aborigines, and it was meant to try to find a phrase that would describe what the Welsh in the 18th century wanted to prove about themselves, that you can't really consider British culture or English culture unless you go back to the original population of the British Isles, which was the Welsh.
One enthusiastic member of a London Welsh society is about to embellish history to great effect and leave Wales with one of its most defining traditions. The Gorsedd ceremony is performed by bards at the annual National Eisteddfod. Musicians, poets and writers are draped in druidic robes and perform rituals that hark back to pre-Roman times. But far from being an ancient Celtic tradition, the Gorsedd is invented in the 18th century. By Edward Williams, a stonecutter and poet from Glamorgan. He's better known by his pen name, Iolo Morgannwg. Mary Ann Constantine has studied his life and works.
Iolo Morgannwg is one of the main architects of Welshness, if you like. A lot of the ingredients that he threw into the pot at around this time have stayed as essential elements of what it means to be Welsh. But what he does discover is that people are interested in this ancient Welshness because there's a big revival in all things Celtic.
Iolo is obsessed with Wales, its language, its beauty, and its history. He wants to create a romanticised, mystical Welsh past, one that never actually existed.
One of the things he does is he walks across Salisbury Plain and he sees Stonehenge. And that's a key moment in his life because the big stones, which are still deeply mysterious to people at the time, they set him thinking, and he does everything he can to find out about the ancient British past and the part that Wales could have played in that.
With the help of his vivid imagination and some laudanum, that's the opium of its day, he falsifies an ancient language. He carves the script onto sticks, claiming that this wooden book, or Pythonen, was used by ancient Welsh poets descended from Druids 2,000 years ago.
One of Iolo's most inspired inventions was an alphabet, which effectively proved that the ancient British were literate and learned and educated, just as the Greek and Romans were, way back in the mists of time. It's a series of, well, little sticks, really, inscribed with various important bardic mottos in the ancient alphabet. It's almost like a child's invented alphabet, your own secret code.
Having claimed that he's the discoverer of an ancient bardic tradition, Iolo then invents a theatre in which to perform this tradition. So he makes his own druidic circles with pebbles. He gathers some literary friends, reenacting the supposedly ancient custom of the bards. In the 1790s, this little band of Georgian Welshmen is the first true Gorsedd.
This is the very first place where he can welcome other people into this fraternity. But once people have bought into the idea, the thing grows. And you start having Gorseddau around Wales. The thing takes on a life of its own. Y gwir yn erbyn y byd.
Iolo's Gorsedd starts to be performed in local Eisteddfodau. Over time, the ceremonies grow more elaborate and new rituals are invented. By the 19th century, it is the centrepiece of the National Eisteddfod and remains so to this day. Iolo and his forgeries aren't rumbled until long after his death in 1826, but during his lifetime, the public lap it up. Iolo has started a cultural reawakening at a crucial time.
As industrialisation takes root and gains ground and literally starts to change the landscape and territories of people's homelands, people start to feel that they're losing something. Iolo's part and parcel of that big European movement to retrieve the past before it's too late. And simultaneously, desperately trying to promote and rescue Welsh culture from what they felt was an inevitable ruin and decline as industrialisation took over.
While Iolo Morgannwg gives Wales a dignified story of its past, the wheels of industrialisation thunder on. And one particular industry will forge a new era for Wales. It will bring vast wealth, aching poverty, and terrible slums. Iron. From 1756 onwards, Britain is involved in naval conflicts around its ever-expanding empire, and its navy is hungry for iron to manufacture its weapons. So English ironmasters are on the hunt for coal to fuel their furnaces. South Wales has that, and much more than they expect.
What the English ironmasters find in South Wales is a money-making paradise. Plenty of coal, fast-moving streams for water power, limestone, iron ore, all the raw materials for making iron in one place. It's as if the hills around the small village of Merthyr Tydfil are made for the iron industry.
The ironmasters who arrive here in the 18th century have hit the jackpot, and Merthyr Tydfil is about to feel the impact of their discovery. Richard Crawshay is an iron merchant who's made his fortune in London. With an eye for a good investment, he buys one of the new ironworks around Merthyr. Over the next 30 years, Cyfarthfa becomes the most profitable ironworks in the world. Today, what remains of it is still impressive. Historian Chris Evans is going to show me why Cyfarthfa is so important.
I'm astonished by the scale of this place, really. It's immense, isn't it?
It is immense, but you've got to imagine when the works were in their heyday that this space would have been occupied by a blowing engine, a really vast piece of machinery that would have driven air into the heart of the furnaces themselves.
When you say furnaces, how many?
Oh, there's plenty here. We're looking at one here, there's one there, and further down there would have been another 4 in a rank. So talking a lot of furnaces, consuming a lot of air. So, if we go this way, we can see how it worked.
Today, it's only the access tunnels to the furnaces that remain. They once drew air into the kilns 60 feet high. Back then, these passageways could reach temperatures over 1,000 degrees centigrade. It's like being in the heart of a giant oven.
Chris, why are these works so important?
Well, these works at the end of the 18th century were the largest in the world by some considerable distance. The reason why these works are important is not just the blast furnaces, it's the fact that the pig iron that was made in these blast furnaces was then processed by a revolutionary technique, puddling and rolling, or what became known as the Welsh method.
Puddling, or the Welsh method, is hot, dangerous work, stirring molten iron to refine it and increase productivity. But it takes Crawshay and his men 3 years of experiments before it is commercially viable. The Welsh method produces iron that is strong and cheap.
So Crawshay himself was, what, a groundbreaking pioneer?
He was indeed. He was able to do so because he had money to devote to it. He was an extremely rich London merchant, and he could afford to throw resources and time at developing a technique that was, in other respects, hard to crack. So it's his money made in London, deployed in Merthyr, that makes the big difference.
He got pots of money.
Loads of it. And once he'd cracked it, he made pots more.
Crawshay has perfected the Welsh method. Not bad for an Englishman. It revolutionises the iron industry in Merthyr and beyond.
If in the mid-19th century we went to the Ruhr in Germany or we went to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we would find that technique being used there. It becomes a global technique, the global success story.
By 1802, Cyfarthfa iron is at the forefront of the Napoleonic War effort. It attracts a visit from the greatest naval figure of the day, Admiral Lord Nelson. Just 3 years later, with his Welsh-made iron, he wins one of the most decisive naval battles in history, Trafalgar. This new commercial Wales needs a new transport system to carry the heavy cargoes of its industries. Canals replace wagons and horses. They are the motorways of the 18th century. Great engineers display their inventive genius in North Wales, completing the Pont Cysylltu aqueduct in 1805. It is a monument to the confidence and wealth of this new era. But the most revolutionary transport of this time is about to be born, right here in Wales.
In 1804, the owner of the Pen y Darren Ironworks, Samuel Homfrey, makes a bet with his fellow ironmaster, Richard Crawshay. The wager is 1,000 guineas, an absolute fortune in today's terms. And he bets that he can build a steam engine that can take 10 tons of iron from Merthyr to Abercynon. It's about 9 miles. True to form, Crawshay can't resist the challenge.
Homfrey enlists the help of a Cornish engineer, Richard Trevithick. He builds the world's first working steam engine that runs on rails. On the 21st of February 1804, people come from far and wide to witness the great experiment. Five trams set off, loaded with iron, and 70 men.
But it isn't long before disaster strikes. The chimney of the locomotive collides with a low bridge. There's a lot of damage. Well, Trevithick repairs the engine, clears away the rubble, patches up the chimney, and before long, he's on his way again at the hair-raising speed of 5 miles an hour.
Nine hours later, Trevithick, his engine and cargo reach Abercynon still intact. The ironmaster's wager proves that steam locomotion is possible and that railways are the future. But the revolutionary changes of this time are not confined to trade and transport. This is also a time for revolutionary ideas. One Welshman, Dr. Richard Price, has ideas about liberty and freedom that will help ordinary people fight for their rights. His controversial ideas spread not only in Wales, but to England, to Europe, and even to America. He's been described as the greatest thinker Wales has ever produced. And he's buried at Bunhill Fields in London, the resting place of many famous radicals and dissenters.
When Price dies in 1791, the funeral route is so crowded that the cortege is 5 hours late when it arrives here at the burial ground. In France, they declare a day of national mourning. In America, he's held up as a great thinker who inspires the American Revolution. And all this because the man laid to rest right here is recognized as a true libertarian, someone who spends his life trying to extend the religious and political freedoms of all people.
Price is a nonconformist minister from Llangaenor near Bridgend and famed for his charismatic sermons. Politicians, reformers, even the founding fathers of the United States want to hear what he has to say about the rights of ordinary people.
Price's reputation is established by a book he publishes in 1776. It's called Observations on Civil Liberty. It's basically a manifesto for freedom. The big idea is that communities everywhere have the right to govern themselves. And when it comes to members of Parliament, well, he sees them as trustees, people who are there to do the will of the people. We might think that's quite reasonable today. In those days, it was a revolutionary thought.
Price wants power to be in the hands of the people, not with self-appointed governments or monarchs. He has his finger on the pulse because this is a time when wars against oppression are being waged. In America, colonists are fighting for their independence from the English crown. But it's at the start of the French Revolution in 1789 that Parys causes a real stir with a sermon at his church in North London.
Richard Parys steps into this church, the church he leads for 26 years. And this is where he delivers an explosive message to the waiting congregation. The French Revolution is underway, the mob is in control, and with all of this going on, Richard Parys delivers an apocalyptic warning.
His words are aimed at governments and kings who oppress their people.
Tremble, all ye oppressors of the world. You cannot hold the world in darkness. Restore to mankind their rights and consent to the correction of abuses before they and you are destroyed together.
Parys openly supports the French Revolution, and he says that British people also have the right to fight for liberty. But at home he's dismissed by the establishment, lampooned in the press, and accused of stirring up bloodshed and anarchy. In fact, his ideas are a milestone on the road to a modern concept of civil rights and democracy. In the midst of the hardships of industrial Wales, these big ideas will eventually lead to big trouble. Back in the hills around Merthyr Tydfil, a chain of enormous ironworks stretches along the edge of the South Wales coalfield. And with them spring up several new towns. By far the largest is Merthyr itself. Once a village of just 40 houses in 1760, it is now the iron capital of the world, with a population of 8,000 and growing. The iron industry attracts workers from rural Wales, Ireland, England and Scotland. This is Chapel Row, cottages built in the 1820s for the Cyfarthfa ironworkers.
It's the rate of expansion that is astonishing, and it throws together a mass of urban immigrants who live in terribly overcrowded, filthy, often primitive conditions. But there are differences. It depends on the kind of job you do. And if you work in the iron industry, for example, you might get lucky. You might live in one of these. The size of the house is a status symbol. There's nothing new about that. Unskilled workers would live in just 2 rooms. This house is rather different. There are 4 rooms here, 2 downstairs, and then 2 upstairs. And what you find is that this little room can be set aside for lodgers. As many as 5 of them squeezed into this tiny space.
The lack of housing attracts greedy speculators who build temporary homes on top of iron slag heaps and waste. Merthyr's slums are a tumble-down network of hovels, nicknamed Little Hell. A report from the 1840s describes one home that measures just 4.5 feet by 7.
Now just imagine living in a room this size. There we go. Husband, wife, children, cooking, eating, sleeping, all kinds of other things in a room as small as this. And then next door, another family, and then another family, and then another family. In 1841 in Merthyr, there are 1,500 people living in stone huts this size. It's one of the biggest slums in Wales, and the conditions are unimaginable.
That doesn't put people off. Merthyr is a frontier town that promises to fulfill the dreams of those desperate to be part of an exciting modern age. But the reality is very different. For most who arrive here, Merthyr is filthy, crime-ridden and dangerous.
The overcrowding in industrial towns like Merthyr is a public health disaster. There are no toilets, the roads are open sewers, people are infested with lice, and in these squalid conditions, infection and disease can spread at a terrifying speed.
Without sewers or a clean water supply, typhus, dysentery and cholera torment Wales's industrial towns to devastating effect. Between 1800 and 1850, cholera, known as the King of Terrors, kills several hundred each summer. Outside the iron town of Tredegar, at the Cefn Golau Cemetery, lie the remains of more than 200 victims of cholera.
The bleak isolation of this place tells its own story. Cholera is a horrifying illness. Families who appear fit and well in the morning can all be dead by that evening. There is no known cause or cure. The usual burial grounds are out of bounds, so cholera victims are laid to rest in lonely spots like this, high on mountain tops, far from society.
So weathered are the gravestones, the inscriptions are barely legible. In the early 19th century, it isn't yet known that cholera is spread by contaminated water. Those affected suffer vomiting, diarrhea and cramps. In severe cases, death comes in a matter of hours. 1 in 4 of those who die are infants. And those who survive are struck by fear and panic. They turn to God for their comfort.
When funeral processions pass by, people hide in their homes, closing doors, terrified that they might become infected. The homes of the dead are boarded up, and the families of victims will do anything to avoid the stigma. They bury their dead at night, and if they can afford it, they leave town.
For many, life in the industrial towns of Wales is a struggle for survival. But for a few, industrialisation brings great fortune and vast wealth.
As the iron industry expands, the iron masters establish themselves in the grandest possible manner. In 1825, William Crawshay, the third owner of the biggest ironworks in Britain, decides to outdo all of his rivals. And he builds himself a castle.
Cyfarthfa Castle, with its mock battlements and 72 rooms, costs Crawshay £30,000. That's over £3 million in modern money. Once a family home, it's now a museum of an extravagant lifestyle.
This is the centre of power. This is the room from which Crawshay runs his empire. And from these windows, he can keep a sharp eye on his long-suffering workers in the ironworks below. He can spot problems and sort them out. I suppose you could say he's living above the shop, in some style. Now, somewhere in this room is graphic evidence of Crawshay's wealth. Not there. Ah, here we are. This is the office safe. It's more like a bank vault. This is where Crawshay kept all the cash to pay his workers. I'd love to have a look inside, but I'm told they've lost the key. But it does tell you everything you need to know about the immense fortune that this family made.
And when celebrations are in order, not a penny is spared. For a family wedding in 1847, the ironworks are dressed for a grand banquet and ball. More than 1,000 guests are offered 10,000 quarts of beer and an array of 29 different dishes. All over Wales, the vast wealth of industrialisation is on display. Most extravagant of all is Penrhyn Castle in North Wales. built on fortunes made from Welsh slate and Jamaican sugar. But all this is in stark contrast to the lives of the workers. Even children as young as 5 work in terrible conditions. Not only poorly paid, workers also face the daily risk of accidents, none more so than in the ironworks.
Actually making raw ties is one of the hardest things in the Industrial Revolution. There's nothing harder. Anybody who saw it said it was the cruelest work that they ever saw. This stuff, raw tie, was made in basically 100-weight lumps by teams of men. It's not mass steel production, it was all handwork, all by skill of the operator and the team, handed down from father to son.
The working life of a puddler who stirs the molten iron is usually over by the age of 40.
You work really hard, you get incredibly sweaty, you lose a lot of body fluid, and then of course you stop and your body chills out. So, you know, they've got a lot of rheumatic problems. Also, the people looking at the furnace were staring into effectively a white heat. You can tell the temperature of the iron just by looking at it. But if you spend a lifetime looking at it, you very quickly go blind.
With all these hardships, people feel powerless and trapped. These feelings will culminate in one of the bloodiest incidents in Britain's industrial history. When wages are cut and workers laid off in May 1831, the workforce erupts in anger. The ironmasters can only look on as a crowd of 10,000 seizes Merthyr by force. Using armed blockades, they fight off regiments of troops for a whole week. Inspired by a potent symbol of revolution, the workers take a rag and soak it in cow's blood.
It is during this uprising that a red flag is raised by British workers for the very first time. It becomes a symbol of solidarity. This uprising isn't some spot of local bother. It is organised, it is connected, and after years of unrest, the working class of Wales have an appetite for revolution.
When the authorities regain control, 20 are dead. One protester, known as Dick Penderyn, is hanged for allegedly wounding a soldier. He's long remembered as a working-class martyr and hero. The Industrial Revolution is sharply dividing Welsh society, the rich and the poor. And the rebellious mood this inspires isn't just confined to the new iron towns. Rebellion is also brewing in rural Wales.
On the night of the 13th of May, 1839, a group of men descends on this small village in Carmarthenshire. It's called Effail Wen. They're armed with axes and sledgehammers and big sticks, and they destroy the new toll gate that's just been installed. Then they move on to the toll house and burn it down.
The attack at Effail Wen is just the beginning of an underground movement of protest that sweeps across West Wales. Poverty-stricken farmers are angry that new private companies, the turnpike trusts, are charging too much to use the roads. There'll be more than 200 attacks on toll gates over the next 5 years.
Just imagine the lot of the tenant farmer here in West Wales in the early 19th century, paying shockingly high rents to the landowners, paying a tax to the Church of England, a church he doesn't even attend as a chapel goer, paying more taxes to build workhouses, which are prisons for the poor, and then on top of all of that, to get his produce from A to B, he needs to pay a toll to use the roads. Those toll gates are run by some pretty greedy and unprincipled people. Is it any surprise that the tenant farmer resorts to violence?
For the second attack, the farmers adopt what seems to be a bizarre tactic. They dress up in skirts and in aprons and even in bonnets. And then they blacken their faces. After this, they descend on the now rebuilt toll house at Efaelwen and chant a woman's name, Rebecca. They demolish the toll gate and disappear into the night. Their distinctive guerrilla-style attacks will come to be known as the Rebecca riots. The costumes the farmers use are a symbol based on local folklore.
There's one ritual which tells us a lot about local tradition in this part of Wales. It's a humiliation, a form of punishment for wrongdoers. For example, men who beat their wives. They're tied to a wooden chair. Sometimes it's a wooden horse, and then they're paraded in front of the community. And the men dispensing this justice, for reasons we don't quite understand, have blackened faces and they wear women's clothes.
By dressing up, the rioters attacking the toll gates evoke a sense of local justice, and it becomes a potent symbol in Welsh history. But who is Rebecca? And where does she come from?
It could be that one of the leading protesters has a close relative or friend called Rebecca. That's always possible. But I think there's a more likely explanation. And the clue is here in the Bible. We are talking about people who know their Bible inside out. There is a passage in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, and it says this: "And they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, Thou art our sister. Be thou the mother of thousands of millions, and let thy seed possess the gates of those which hate them." So could this Rebekah be the one who inspires the rioters?
May Rebecca's descendants conquer the property of their enemies. It is the sentiment of an oppressed peasantry. Over the months, a hidden wave of support grows through the parishes of West Wales. There are several Rebeccas, riot leaders whose identity is unknown. For 3 years, they elude the military and the London police. As the riots spread, it's believed that even some of the local gentry support the cause. They target other symbols of oppression, workhouses where the poor and infirm are badly treated. On the 19th of June 1843, the protests reach a bold climax.
And this is the scene of the biggest disturbance of that time. It involves 2,000 people. It takes place in broad daylight, and they converge on this place. This is the Penlan Workhouse in Carmarthen. It is full of the most unfortunate members of society. The protest, which is all about genuine grievances, is hijacked by some rather unsavoury characters. And suddenly, it all turns rather nasty.
It is the violence of this protest and the clash with the authorities that brings the plight of the tenant farmers to the attention of the London press. This is the turning point for the Rebecca riots.
By the autumn of 1843, there are police and soldiers roaming the countryside, and at last, the government acknowledges that the rioters have legitimate concerns. A commission is set up to look into these turnpike trusts, and guess what? They uncover malpractice and corruption. So those trusts are reformed and the roads are improved.
Ultimately, the Rebecca riots are a victory. The authorities struggle to track down the riot leaders. The few that are caught face hanging or transportation to the other side of the world.
So what does Rebecca represent? The terror that stalks this countryside is unavoidable. When you have profound injustice and no lawful means of tackling it, you get an explosion of people power. And for me, the Rebecca riots are all about self-respect. Welsh people refusing to tolerate blatant abuse and demanding their share of justice and fair play.
That search for fair play and the people's quest for power are gathering momentum across Britain. Industrialisation has created a working class. People are becoming politicised. And in the 1830s, that means a fight for the right to vote. This struggle for democracy reaches a violent climax in the industrial heartlands of Wales at Newport. On the evening of Sunday, the 3rd of November 1839, a cabinet maker from Pontypool writes a letter.
Dear parents,
his name is George Shell, and he's 19 years old.
I shall, this night, be engaged in a struggle for freedom. And should it please God to spare my life, I will see you soon.
George doesn't know the significant part he's about to play in the story of Wales.
The following morning, George Shell is one of 5,000 people walking down this hill into Newport. They have a common cause. They want the right to vote. They want better lives. And they're part of a much bigger movement, a movement that's going to transform the battle for democratic rights in this country.
George is part of a revolutionary struggle called Chartism. There is huge discontent across Britain that only those with property have the right to vote. The Chartists want to change this, and they have the support of thousands of Welsh industrial workers. But the authorities want to ban the Chartist meetings and to stamp out their cause.
The Chartist leaders here in South Wales feel aggrieved. They petition Parliament, it's the right thing to do, and yet Parliament delivers a snub. But the campaign for the right to vote and for a measure of power over their own lives is unstoppable. So the Chartists are driven to the last resort, the use of force.
Which is why the Chartists on the march are armed. Their intent is to take over Newport and overthrow the authorities who've set up headquarters at the Westgate Hotel.
Months of planning and endless hard work lead up to this moment. Secret identities, secret meetings, secret funding, weapons made and kept at home, other weapons stolen and hidden in caves in the surrounding area.
It's thought that across Britain, other groups of Chartists wait with bated breath. Victory in Newport might trigger uprisings around the whole country.
All of which drives the employers, the captains of industry, the leaders of society into a blind panic. One mine owner hides in his own pit. Landowners flee with their families. One clergyman even hides in a pond. And all because the Chartists are coming.
Originally, 20,000 Chartists set off from nearby industrial towns on the overnight march to Newport. But things go wrong.
Troops are moved into the Westgate Hotel. That is unexpected, and it's one of the things that undermines the Chartist plans. The weather is terrible. It's soaking wet, and lots of the marchers are late arriving. And by the time they come to this place in the heart of Newport, only a quarter of the original marchers are left, and they're exhausted.
On reaching the hotel, they face 30 soldiers supported by special constables who are armed and ready for trouble.
Most accounts seem to suggest that the Chartists fire the first shot. But we don't know whether it's accidental or deliberate. What we do know is that the round of shooting that follows lasts 25 minutes. It's a short, bloody battle, at the end of which the soldiers manage to defend the Westgate Hotel, and the Chartists throw down their weapons and flee.
20 lie dead, and even more are wounded. All of them Chartists. Some of the bodies are laid out in the hotel stables to await burial. Among them is George Shell, the youngest victim.
I shall, this night, be engaged in a struggle for freedom. And should it please God to spare my life, I will see you soon. But if not, grieve not for me. I shall fall in a noble cause.
George Shell is now remembered as a Chartist hero. When troops examine the bodies, they discover an enormous array of weapons and the full extent of the Chartist planning. Newspaper reports marvel at the level of organisation of these ordinary working people. Some of the Chartists from that uprising are buried at St. Woolos Cathedral on the route of their final march.
George Shell is one of 10 Chartists whose bodies are brought here to this churchyard in the dead of night by the military and placed in unmarked graves. The authorities clearly want this campaign to be forgotten. But these are people prepared to die in a noble cause. Not only do they want democratic rights, they want a basic measure of happiness and dignity in their troubled lives. And the Newport Rising is all about that irresistible need for change.
The 3 leaders of the rising are charged with high treason and transported to Australia for life. The Newport Rising is a popular protest by the working class of Wales, the beginning of a political awakening that will dominate the next 100 years in the story of Wales.
It takes one turbulent century to change the face of Wales. A predominantly rural economy becomes an overwhelmingly industrial one, and it brings with it a new class of person, a spirited working class whose poverty and suffering will create a new politics. Our story of Wales is now about rapid change. The Industrial Revolution, the social turmoil, they're only just beginning. The Open University has produced a free booklet for you to learn more about the history of the people of Wales. You can call 0845 366 0253 or go to bbc.co.uk/Story of Wales and follow the links to the Open University.
And there's more from the Story of Wales here on BBC HD at the same time tomorrow.